A cold wind is blowing through the corridors of Europe's power centers, from Brussels to Berlin. In these halls of politics, where power, influence, and prestige collide, a remarkable spectacle took place. A man inflated by his own arrogance and buoyed by the applause of the established media, believed he could give one of Europe's last truly sovereign statesmen a public lesson. The man in question, Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor without vision, who clearly overestimated himself. His target, Viktor Orbán, the unbending defender of Hungarian interests, whom he sought to humiliate in front of the world. But the plan backfired. What was intended as a display of power turned into a fiasco that shook not only Merz himself, but also the entire political structure of the European Union. The question arises, what exactly happened at this memorable confrontation, and what does it reveal about the true forces pushing Europe in a direction many consider dangerous? The stage was set for high drama. Friedrich Merz, in his role as Europe's self-appointed disciplinarian, took the podium. His words were sharp, targeted, and steeped in condescension. They were aimed directly at Budapest. Merz accused Viktor Orbán of every charge in the globalist establishment's handbook, undermining democracy, disregarding the rule of law, and being supposedly too friendly toward Russia. It was the classic attempt to discredit a sovereign nation that refuses to dance to the tune of Berlin and Brussels. Merz assumed it would be an easy win. He, the Chancellor of the EU's largest country, against the Prime Minister of a comparatively small but proud nation, a classic case of David versus Goliath. But he overlooked a crucial fact. This David was no weak opponent. Viktor Orbán is a seasoned statesman who has already brought other powerful adversaries to their knees. When Merz finished his accusatory speech, he awaited the applause of his Brussels entourage. But what happened next was not what he expected. Orbán stepped to the microphone, calm, composed, but with a force that stunned the room. It was not a defense, as one might have anticipated. It was a masterful counterattack, exposing Merz and his government as what many had long suspected. Hypocrites who preach morality to others while hiding their own failings. Orbán did not raise his voice, yet his words struck like hammer blows. He addressed Merz directly. "You speak of the rule of law, Mr. Chancellor. In your own country, the only genuine opposition party, the AfD, is persecuted by a politicized secret service and branded extremist. Your interior minister misuses reports to defame political opponents. Is that your definition of the rule of law?" The silence in the hall was palpable. Orbán continued, "You worry about democracy in Hungary. Yet in your country, several opposition figures die within weeks under mysterious circumstances, and your authorities call it coincidence. Meanwhile, you govern without a valid budget, loosen the debt brake, and create special funds while your infrastructure crumbles. And still you presume to lecture us on good governance?" The effect was devastating. Merz, who sought to present himself as a strong leader, suddenly stood exposed. His arrogance had become his undoing. The attempt to isolate Orbán had failed miserably. Instead, it was Merz who appeared isolated and unmasked. But this was only the beginning. Orbán's speech resonated far beyond Hungary. It served as a signal to other Central and Eastern European nations that a confident bloc of sovereign states was forming, one that would no longer accept dictates from Brussels or Berlin. Poland's new patriotic president immediately sided with Hungary, declaring that attacks on Hungarian sovereignty were also attacks on Poland. Suddenly, it was no longer Merz versus Orbán. It was the entrenched Brussels establishment facing a growing movement of sovereign nations. Merz had triggered an avalanche he could no longer control. Instead of weakening Orbán, he had elevated him into the undisputed leader of Europe's patriotic movement. His threats to cut EU funds to Hungary rang hollow, sounding more like the desperate barking of a wounded dog. The consequences for Germany were equally severe. While Merz stumbled abroad, chaos reigned at home. Finance Minister Lars Klingbeil of the SPD had no grip on the nation's finances. Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt stood idly by while left-wing NGOs tried to strip AfD-affiliated foundations of funding. Merz himself pushed for a harsher stance against the AfD, betraying the last conservative voters who still trusted him. His CDU appeared as nothing more than a submissive executor of a green left agenda. Visionless, spineless, directionless. Amid this political theater, only one force charted a clear course: the alternative for Germany. The AfD immediately saw through Merz's maneuver and denounced it. Leaders like Alice Weidel sharply criticized him, pointing out that his actions damaged Germany internationally. Foreign policy spokesman Markus Frohnmayer emphasized that sovereign nations must defend their right to self-determination, a principle Germany, too, should uphold. For the AfD, the future of Europe lies not in a centralized superstate, but in a Europe of fatherlands, sovereign nations cooperating as partners instead of warring with one another. Co-chair Tino Tripala put it bluntly: a stable Europe requires good relations with all neighbors, including Hungary and Russia, not endless confrontations orchestrated by Berlin or NATO hardliners. Meanwhile, the global paradigm is shifting. In the United States, President Donald Trump continues his America First policy, proving that a government can prioritize its own people. Nations everywhere are awakening. Only the German establishment, led by Merz, clings to a crumbling globalist agenda. Patriots like Orban are attacked not because they are wrong, but because they embody the greatest fear of the elites: the voice of the people. The duel between Merz and Orban was more than a diplomatic clash. It symbolized the struggle for Europe's very soul. On one side stands an aloof elite pushing surveillance, mass migration, and national self-abandonment. On the other side stand politicians and citizens fighting for freedom, sovereignty, and cultural identity. Merz miscalculated. His attack on Orban was not only a diplomatic blunder, it revealed the weakness of the German Chancellor and his blindness to Europe's real challenges. Instead of strengthening allies, Merz wages quarrels abroad while neglecting urgent problems at home. He is not part of the solution, he is part of the problem. This duel demonstrates just how fragile Europe's power structure has become and how quickly the balance can shift when sovereign nations stand together. The question remains: on which side do you stand in this battle for Europe's future? It is not just about politics, but about the direction our continent will take: freedom or control, self-determination or submission, patriotism or globalist domination. This moment marks a turning point and shows that the will of the people is stronger than the arrogance of individual politicians.